good to meet you. It's Noelle, right?
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
I feel like so many people are always like Noel or Noah.
I am
But you
very
have a unique
familiar.
name too. So, yeah, you could relate.
That's right. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good, good. Thank you. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I live in Colorado and I'm a mom of four kids. We have three boys and a girl. Our oldest is about to be 19, 14, 11, and 8. So we have kind of the whole spread. I've lived in Colorado almost my whole life. I can't say born, but definitely raised. We moved here when I was 4 years old. So I would say I'm a native. And yeah, I'm married to my husband, Ty. He works for Aurora Fire Rescue, which is Aurora is like a suburb outside of Denver if you're not from Colorado. But yeah, so he rides the back step of Engine 2 there. And I have a career. I'm typically support executives at the top of organizations. So, and like an executive assistant, personal assistant type of role is what I've done most of my career. Right now, I work a little bit more specifically in a legal space. So I focus on like the legal aspect of an organization, but I typically work in healthcare organizations. So I've worked in, big hospitals, and right now I work in a mental health startup that our whole focus is providing mental health care therapy and psychiatry services for primarily veterans and first responders. But my role is all administrative. So it's, supporting those people that are running the company. Yeah.
Amazing.
So,
I've seen it on social media. It sounds really cool. It looks like an amazing initiative. Tell me a little bit more about it.
so that's what I think what you're seeing on social media is actually like something else. So my
Oh,
day job is with a mental health company. I kind of joke about that. I'm like, oh, that's just my day job.
just
But I also, yeah, I sit on the foundation that supports our fire department. So we have an Aurora Fire Foundation, and I sit on that board. And then what you're seeing on social media is my husband and I run a training company, and that is called Mile High Fire Training.
okay.
So we put on a conference every October and provide training throughout the year for firefighters around the country, right here in Colorado. And then just this year, we've started a spouse track. So I'm behind the spouse track and just trying to create similar to what you're doing, honestly, is, just trying to create a space for those, behind the badge essentially, and a place to meet other people and what worked for you, what worked for me, sort of thing. So we're bringing the spouses in the training program now, which I think will be a really cool thing. But that is what you've seen on social media. So that's just, I mean, yeah, it's a job, but I'm like right now it's just kind of like our side business. Well, we both have full-time jobs essentially.
Right, right. Wow. Okay. So on a day-to-day basis, during the day, you're working for a company that has mental health programs,
Yep.
but you're also doing this just on in your
Yes.
free time.
Yeah, in my spare time. Yeah. When I'm like
Mom of
sitting at, yeah, when I'm, sitting on the sidelines at a sports practice or late at night or early in the morning, those are the things, it's just like, I think, especially having a lot of kids, you get really savvy with your time. And so it's like, oh, I have 5 minutes. I think I can do this. And so I'm lucky enough to work from home. My job is at home now. I used to work in the hospital every single day. So when I transitioned to a new company, that was one of the huge benefits, and, has provided a lot of flexibility as far as taking care of the kids, dealing with a firefighter schedule, and then running a business.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. It's a lot to handle at the same. How did the Mile High Conference get started? What was the initial start for that?
So actually, one of the other firefighters in Aurora had the idea, and he had started the conference 10 years ago. And the conference was to benefit the benevolent fund in Aurora for the firefighters. Or gets hurt in the line of duty, or you have a family member that gets sick or hurt, the benevolent fund does step in and they financially help that family, whether that's just like helping them get a plane ticket, or, the worst case scenario is stepping in, to help with any needs, basically, if a firefighter is hospitalized or
Right.
hurt. So that's what the Benevolent Fund is for. And the conference was originally started that where all of the proceeds directly go into the benevolent fund. And it has grown and become more and more popular in just a much bigger undertaking. And the gentleman who started it kind of got to a point where he was like, this is a lot. I really am looking to pass it on. And Ty and I were both interested and pretty involved in the department anyway. Ty was already on the benevolent fund. I'm sitting on a board of the foundation, and we were like, yeah, Ty had been teaching at the conference for a couple of years at that point, and we were like, we'll do it, and so we've really tried to do him well of his vision, and we took it over last year, and it has been, a learning journey. It's really fun that we get to do it together. It's just like part of our life now, and I think he's really proud to see how it's grown, because it has grown a lot, even just in the last 2 years. So we saw the amount that the conference was growing, and we turned it into a business. So taking it from just a 1 weekend a year conference to being like, oh, okay, well, we can offer training throughout the year at this point. The demand is there for it. So that's kind of how it got started.
That's fantastic. What kind of training are you doing? So, I mean, just thinking of how my husband trains at work, they do training on the job. And when they first start, they're doing the academy, right? So that's how they get their training. So what is the Mile High Conference offering?
So we offer all different kinds of training. So the first 2 days of the conference are lecture based, and we bring in speakers from, again, it's like all across, and they're all different focuses. So, last year, for example, like one of our lectures was a mental health focus, and it was a talk from a firefighter on the line of his experience and kind of like what led him to mental health and what treatment he received, and then how that helped. Some of the lectures are a little more tactics based. So some of them are around, specifically like, engine work and why the stretch of a line is important and why it affects safety or makes the fire ground more effective. So 2 days are a lecture, and they sit in a lecture hall and they hear 6 to 7 different speakers and all different topics. Some are, based around leadership. So whether that's, a lieutenant or a captain focused lecture, and some, like I said, are tactics based. And then the second 2 days are we call hot. So they're hands-on training. And again, there's a multitude of different classes that they could sign up for. So some are live fire classes. So they do like a live burn, and they're, working on whether it's RIT skills, where that's the, firefighter rescue training. Some are really truck focused, where it is on survival or, forcible entry. Some are engine focused on stretching and hose placement. There's a driving and operating course specifically for engineers. There's a tactical decision-making course that's really focused on, like, they have them do kind of an intense workout, so they get their heart rate up a lot, and then they basically give them like a size up to do. And they're like, okay, what does this look like? So trying to simulate that same idea of like, okay, the tone's dropped, you're headed to a house fire, you have to do this. So there's a wide array of like all different classes, and the people that come essentially pick which classes that they want to sign up for. And then the spouses track this year is its own little piece of that. So the spouses track is a 1 day built out, similar to the lecture series, but a 1 day built out content piece of, mental health and networking and how to manage when things go sideways when your spouse is on duty, because inevitably like that happens. A little bit of just like recipe swaps and get to know each other. Like, how long have you done this? Or how long have you done this? And then the second day is similar. The spouses are going to hit the training ground and get to put on gear and spray a hose and force a door and climb a tower lap and kind of get to feel like, oh, this is hard, or this is what it feels like, or this is fun. But the neat thing is where they're doing that, a lot of the other hands-on classes are happening. So while they get to try it, they can like literally turn around and see their spouse doing that exact thing. And you have just a little more like, oh, you made that look really easy. And that didn't feel as easy as I thought it would be.
Wow. Have you ever tried any of that?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, just kind of being around it a lot, I get to play sometimes. I've never been on air, and I've never gone into a fire. I have not done that. I would, at this point, I'm like, yeah, like I'm kind of curious to see what's in there. But yeah, I've picked up the irons and played with them. My kids love to force the door. They think that's like super fun to
Oh, really?
to do that. And so we have, drag dummies for training. And my daughter thinks it's really funny to like drag them around the house to train. She really wants to be a firefighter.
Well,
And
that's great.
yeah, so I am also dragging the dummy, just like removing it so I'm not tripping over it in the middle of the house, So I'm
Walk into
like,
the room and see like a body.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
hopefully no one comes in here to search my house because they'll have to be like, hey, just so you know, that's a training dummy. It's not a body, like 6 feet in the door.
That must be so scary. I'd freak out.
You get pretty used to it. You're just like, oh, this is our life.
Nice. So how did you and Ty meet?
Ty and I actually grew up together. So we grew up in a small town above Boulder, Colorado. And so I've known him since the second grade. We didn't date in grade school or high school. We did go to a really small school, so we knew each other pretty well. But my younger sister and Ty's younger brother are very, very best of friends. And kind of years after we graduated and lived a little bit of life, they set us up kind of in a scheming way, convinced me to go to a birthday party for him. That wasn't really a birthday party. It was just a date with the two of us. And yeah, we've been together since the date. It just worked out. It's kind of nice when you grow up in the same small town and in a similar way. It was like, I already knew him in a way, but it worked. So we've
That's
been
great.
together since then.
That's a nice story, and you know the family well because your sister and
Yeah.
your
Oh
brother
yeah.
are friends. That's really sweet. That's great. Was he already planning to be a firefighter? Did you know what you were getting into?
Yes. So Ty had already been a firefighter for several years before then. He was actually a firefighter. He had moved to Hawaii and he was a firefighter in Honolulu for several years. And then he had just come back to be closer to family. And I was still in Colorado. So when we started dating, he was on probation with Aurora. So I had never had any experience with the fire service. I don't have family in the fire service or anything like that. But I worked in healthcare. I worked in the hospital. So the whole 24/7, 365 idea wasn't a huge issue. That wasn't a huge adjustment for me because that was the life of the hospital. Even though I was in an admin job, you still have to go to the hospital on Christmas. People need help. So I think that made that transition a little bit easier. But yeah, he was on probation when we started dating. So we've been together through his whole career at Aurora.
Okay. And what do you think? What have you thought going in compared to now? How are things different?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I went to school to study medicine. So I've always had kind of an interest in that world and helping people. So for me, it was more interesting than I would say intimidating necessarily. And it was fun. I think I had the same natural reaction that a lot of people have is just oh, this is cool. He's a firefighter and he helps people, and you're just like, oh, neat. And then I think as time goes, by your adjustment and perspective changes too. And I've grown with him along with his career. So, well, initially, when we first got married and, you're really proud that he's a firefighter. And I would say I'm still really proud. Of course, I've listened to all of your guests and I think all of us would say that simultaneously. Naturally, you're proud of what they do, how he shows up for his crew in the community and is wonderful. But I'd say the transition over time is now I'm really proud to be the anchor of our family and for him. So I take a lot of pride in being the entire world is expecting him to show up. And when he shows up, he is their sense of hope or he can fix something or maybe make their day better in an absolute worst moment. And so for me, I'm the person he can count on. The whole world's counting on him, but he could count on me. And I just think that that's where my pride lies is the fire service is unpredictable. I don't know what his shift is going to look like. I have no idea what kind of calls he's going to run or how busy it is or, the schedule. You do have a good idea ahead of time, but yeah, you could get mandatory or anything like that. But if I'm able to stay steady and keep us moving day to day and keep the house under control and have the confidence and independence to be this is what needs to happen and shift quickly, that allows him to stay focused there and do what he does best, you know? So I think now, like, what the world sees is the lights and the sirens and the turnout gear and the hero. And that's amazing. What they don't see is the system behind it. And, you know, the families are the system behind that. And so now I would say I'm really proud to be that, you know, that system for him.
And you should be. I mean, I think one of the things I'm picking up on with talking to all the previous guests is, there's a lot more to it than when you first get into it and you don't
Oh,
realize,
yeah.
you know, yeah, it's glorious in the beginning, the fame and the glory kind of thing, but
Yeah.
there is so much that needs to happen for that to even be possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you think I've asked people this before. I've asked if you think your kids would want to be firefighters, and it sounds like your daughter does. Do you think any of your kids would marry into a fire family?
Well, so yeah, I will say that being a wife in the fire service is one thing, you know, trusting your spouse and letting them walk out the door. You know, you've had a couple other wives mention this, is like that thing in the back of your head, right? Where you're like, oh man, like please come home safe. It's not something we talk about a lot, but it's something that we do live. It's just a reality of it. My oldest son, who is 19, is in the final testing process for Aurora right now.
Mm.
And so that is a huge transition, I would say, going from being a wife to a mom. You know, you're letting your kids walk into this world. And I'm incredibly proud to have him do that. You know, it's a very selfless thing. It's a community that I treasure and I very, very, very much trust. But also, you know what he is going to see and experience. And those are the things as a mom you work so hard to protect your kids from. So you're like, it's that fine balance, right? Of being like, okay, like you're ready for this, but also, oh my gosh, that's my kid. So yeah, I am currently walking those footsteps of a mom in the fire service now. And my daughter absolutely wants, she's very vocal about it. She has been, she's 8, and I would say since 5 years old, even younger, but really at 5, she spends all the time at the station. She has her own gear. She's she's for it. When my son was interviewing, when he was practicing his interviews, she wanted to practice interviews with him. Like she has a Class A jacket and she put it on and she's like ready to go. So I very likely have 2 legacies in the family. Merriman, I don't know about the other 2 boys. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's very much our life. It's very much our family and our friends. So I think that's a comfort circle for them. And they found a lot of trust and community there. So I'd be so proud if they did, and it wouldn't shock me at all. But I think at this point, we call them our bookends. So our oldest and our youngest, more likely than unlikely that, they will be legacies.
I mean, congratulations. Good for them. Best of luck.
Thank you.
It's like I can't even put myself in your shoes right now. I think if you've listened, my kids are young, so I'm not there yet.
Yeah. How old are they again?
4 and almost 9 months. So they're little.
Oh yeah, very young. But it
Thankfully,
goes. I'm sure we said that it goes fast, and all of a sudden you're just like, oh wow,
they're 19.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, how do I have a 19-year-old?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's what everybody tells me. And my my 4-year-old certainly acts like she's a grown up. So
oh
we're
yeah,
so.
yeah. Especially with girls. Yeah, having 3 boys and then the girl. I'm like my 8-year-old little girl. I mean, she's so mature, and some days I'm just like, how are you 8? Like I feel like I'm having a conversation with a 20-year-old.
That's a big age gap, 19 and 8. Wow. How was that for you?
Yeah. Great. So it has worked out to where it's so funny too, because the 19 and the 8-year-old, my oldest boy and my youngest girl, are also very, very similar personalities. They're not just the fire service, but just their likes and interests are so similar. They're thick as thieves, and for her, it's the coolest experience in the world, right? Like her older brother puts her in the car and takes her to get ice cream. And that's,
Okay.
I was the oldest. And so I'm like, you have it so good. Like, she has this older brother, 3 older brothers that really just like let her, rule the roost, and she loves it. But they're each spaced out enough where it works so well for us, and we just got lucky with that, I think. The boys are all into kind of different, they play different sports or they have different interests per se, but yeah, they're all buddies and they're all old enough where they could kind of help the next. And so that was huge, when they were younger. Obviously, when my daughter was born, my oldest son was 10 years old, and, then I had a 6-year-old. So it was, super helpful. Like the 10-year-old could get snacks, and it just makes the whole thing a lot easier, when they're so little. That's tiring. It's exhausting, and so
Right.
the age gap for us works nice.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. Now, what do you do in your free time, which I'm sure you don't have a lot of? What kind of stuff do you do?
Well, most of my free time, like I said, is around the training business, or I sit on the board of the foundation. But where I go to kids' sports, my daughter plays softball, my 14-year-old plays baseball, our other boy who's 11 plays rugby and football. And so I spend a lot of time at sports fields. I love yoga. I don't get to do it very often, but we have a local yoga studio that when I get a slice of time, I will make a yoga class and try to, just breathe amongst like the chaos that lives. And we spend a lot of time at the firehouse. I'm really, really close to several of the spouses on our crew and on the job, and a couple of the other ladies that work alongside my husband. So we often find our way down to the firehouse. We don't live in Aurora, but we live like 20 minutes away from the station. So it's really easy for us to get in the car and just be like, let's go visit. And sometimes we go visit Dad at his station, and sometimes we go visit like an auntie that's working at a neighboring station, because I'm like, we're going to go see her today. So yeah, I'm around it a lot. So I do spend a lot of time there.
What is Ty's schedule like?
So he's a 24 hours on, 48 hours off. And then he's on a Kelly schedule. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Kelly schedule. They essentially, based on rank, bid a day. So like Ty's bid day is Saturday. So if Saturday was his shift day, he won't work that day. So he'll land a 5-day then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like 24 on, 48 off, 24 on, 48 off, just sequentially. So we have 3 shifts, A, B, and C shift.
Okay.
He's on C shift. And then, it's usually like once a month. Sometimes it will land twice a month. It kind of just depends on how the schedule falls. But yeah, if he was working on Wednesday, essentially, he'd be off Thursday, Friday, and then he'd work Saturday. But because Saturday is his Kelly, he doesn't work. So he'll be off Wednesday. He'll work Wednesday, and he's off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He goes back Tuesday. So we land a 5-day.
Okay. And that's every Saturday?
Every Saturday, yeah. So you get to bid a day based on seniority. So like now we've hit the point where we can bid a weekend day, which is obviously the hardest days to get. But you also get to bid depending on like your rank, and it has to be like so many lieutenants get this day, so many paramedics or whatever. But Saturdays work for us because we have a lot of sports on Saturdays. So it's just nicer because a lot of times we're dividing and conquering. I'm at a softball field and he's at a rugby field or something like that. And then if we don't have anything going on, he can pick up overtime on his Kelly and end up working it if we need. But that's what his schedule looks like.
And if somebody calls out on his Kelly, does he get forced to come in, or no, he'll never be forced to work a Saturday?
I mean, if the staffing was low enough, he could get forced. They wouldn't force the Kellys, first of all. They just force it on like a mandatory list. So, your name hits the top and you're the next up, and then you go to the bottom of the list essentially and work your way back up. Luckily, with our department, we haven't experienced a lot of that. Like, people like to pick up overtime. So, you don't get mandoed a whole lot. Sometimes in the summer, if the wildland, guys are deployed, then that will occasionally happen. But most folks, like, it's been a while since we've gotten mandatory.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely nice.
Yeah, that's really nice. Does it make it less predictable what the schedule is going to be? Because I guess for me, I already know this. Like, I can tell you the schedule for the rest of ever until Robbie.
Yeah, same. Yeah, okay. I could do the same thing. Yeah, if Ty stays on like his shift, C shift, it's the exact same thing. Like, unless we were to bid a different Kelly day. So unless we were like, oh, we want Wednesday, that would change that one day. But no, I can look out for as long as I want. And I know, what days he's working. So I think a lot of people say the schedule is unpredictable, where say the schedule is very predictable for at least our department. Like we don't get mandatory and stuff a lot. What's unpredictable is, the calls or the volume.
Exactly. And if they come home on time or not. Exactly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah. I always say that I'm like, he'll leave about 6. I'll see like 6 in the morning. And then I don't expect him home before 10 a.m. the next day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Even though the shift has like ended, probably at 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back a little, you mentioned you studied medicine in school. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I did my undergrad in pre-med.
Okay.
So I intended to go to medical school. I wanted to do pediatric trauma medicine, but I ended up having my oldest son. And so kind of made that decision in the moment of like, okay, do I pursue medical school or do I have this infant? And I had a decent career at that point in time and made sense to be like, I should stick with this career and do that. And then I can always go back. And I never ended up going back. And now looking back, I'm glad I didn't. Being a mom in emergency medicine is brutal. I have a couple friends that do it and it's really hard. Once you have kids, seeing that every day is rough, especially with now paired with, what Ty does. Ty's in a really high volume, really high acuity house. He is a paramedic. And so I think having 2 people experience that on a daily basis would be challenging.
Yeah, I can see that. The stress level in your home would be maybe not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be tough.
Yeah. So is everybody on his department a paramedic?
Not everyone is a paramedic, but it is an ALS department. So I would say the majority of the department do have a paramedic. Yeah. That's a seat you would sit in. So there's a firefighter, there's a paramedic, and then the engineer, the chauffeur, and then the officer, whether that's lieutenant or captain. So lieutenant rides on the engine and captain rides on the ladder.
Okay. So will it be, because I'm just kind of thinking compared to Natick. So Robbie's lieutenant, he's on the ladder.
Okay.
But some shifts he'll be put on the ambulance and somebody else will be on the ladder instead. Is that kind of how Ty's department works?
No, not necessarily. So Aurora has the medical control for the city. So whenever there's a medical call, fire shows up and like Ty, for example, is the paramedic. So he's the attending medic for that call. And then they have an ambulance company that's contracted that just transports the patient. So if it's a patient that's critical enough, Ty and another firefighter who's an EMT would get in the ambulance and ride with the patient to the hospital. If that's not necessary, then that ambulance and EMT can just transport the patient at that point. But they never get roved to an ambulance. So they're always on their assigned apparatus, whether that's the engine or the ladder, which is really nice. I mean, for them at that point, but they still arrive and they take care of the patient and they do all of that. The easiest way to describe it is the ambulance is kind of like an Uber, like, it shows up and it's just there for the transport, but the fire department is providing all the medical care.
Do you like to hear about the things that he does at work?
Yeah. Yeah. Having an interest in medicine to begin with, I think helped. So I've heard a couple of the other wives talk about this. I am very much a radio listener. I'm pretty savvy listening to the radio, enough so that I think it's funny, like if we're somewhere together, the other wives, they'll be like, what did they just say? What did that mean? And I'm like, oh, they're just doing this. But I like to listen. I like to know what's going on out of curiosity and interest. I have an interest in medicine. So I will like to kind of talk through stuff with him. But, also obviously to just like kind of know where he's at and what's going on. But yeah, we have a pretty open communication system. So I have a pretty decent idea what he's seeing when he comes home.
Now, if you've listened, you've heard some of these questions before. Best part, worst part. I like hearing that kind of stuff. What have your feelings been about it?
Yeah, best part, I think a lot of wives have said this. The best part is fire family, like hands down. I work in what you would call corporate America. It's not necessarily corporate, like a hospital system or whatnot, but I work in a business environment. And I have great coworkers. They're very kind. But the fire service is different. I have spent a decent amount of time really getting to know a lot of the firefighters that work for Aurora and especially Ty's crew. And, these are people that I can, without a doubt, trust my children's lives with in a minute. And that's that's heavy when you're a parent, having that confidence in people and trust. And they're also just like, they get it. They live this life. They understand the challenges. They understand difficult calls or the sense of humor or, just what the culture is like. You can show up and be really tired and you don't have to explain why you're tired. You can cancel plans, last minute because it's like, this doesn't work, or hey, you picked up overtime. And these are the people too that are just, they're showing up for my kids' birthdays, my kids' graduations. Like they are the people that are there without question, whether it's a celebration or whether you need dinner made because your kid was just in the hospital and you're, trying to just hold together. So yeah, I'd say the fire family without a doubt is the best part. And, it doesn't start overnight. When I first started going to the station and visiting, I did not know anyone. Did not grow up in the fire service, but it does grow over time. The more you go and the more you show up. And, like one day Ty's whole crew has a group chat and I just asked him, I was like, can I have the wives' numbers? I just made a group chat. Like someone's just got to do it, And if you don't want to be on it, you didn't have to, like, no sweat. But if you wanted to, great. And it's a great resource. It's like, hey, does anybody know who our eye insurance is? Or, hey, like, did you guys see that wreck on the highway? Are they on that? Or, they're on duty. Does anybody want to get together and have pizza? So it can be a wide variety. Sometimes it's silly memes we just send to each other. And that's great. Like it just takes time. It takes time to build that. But I think one of the coolest parts too is now, initially you would see some of the younger, like the newer wives come into the station and they're tentative and they kind of hang by their person and, they're trying to stay out of the way. And Ty's house, especially, it's a double company house. There's a battalion chief that runs out of it and it's the hazmat house. So it's busy. Their tones are dropping a lot. It's loud. It's chaotic. It's a busy place. And so it can be intimidating when you're like, you haven't experienced that. But watching those wives who came in tentatively and they start to get to know some of the other wives in the culture. And like, a couple of times later, they come in and it's like they pass their kid off to another wife and they sit down finally, or they go cook something in the kitchen, or they set up a coloring table for the kids. Like all of a sudden they're at home and they're comfortable and they get a break. And watching that transition has been so cool. So, getting to experience it yourself is awesome, but also kind of like cultivating that for other people that are coming in, I think is equally as awesome. But yeah, I'd say the best part, if you don't live this, you can't explain it to somebody. I've tried very hard to explain it to coworkers and they're just like, what? But yeah, we're very, very lucky to have a very, very awesome fire family.
That's great. That support, you can't do it without it.
No. Mm-hmm.
Right. What about the worst part or the hardest part?
Yeah, I'd say the hardest part is, aside from just like the exhaustion, I think a lot of the other spouses have mentioned that whether it's physical or mental, they might not go on a ton of calls in one shift, but it could be two calls that are just really mentally exhausting. And you just have to learn to like ride that wave and what that feels like. And I think as the spouse and the family, you get really good at doing that, or that starts to get easier. It's harder as, the circle expands, right? Family don't always understand, like, why are you so tired? So that is hard. But I'd say the most challenging part that I didn't necessarily like consider coming in is perspective change. So, once you've been in this for a while, you do look at the world a little bit different. You understand what can happen in a split second and you're a little more aware, right? It's like you go somewhere and you know where the exits are, or what happened here, what happened there. It's like your senses are a little more heightened, and it's a balance of living your life and not being scared, but also being aware of what can happen, and knowing just how quickly things can change, and how many people just don't, they don't have any idea of that side of it. And so I think that's probably the most challenging, is that your perspective does change.
I never considered that. We have a fire plan. You must have one, but
Oh yeah,
a lot of families do.
I've had a fire. Yeah.
Fire.
Yeah.
What happened?
This actually is very recent. And so I joke about this in my spouse track thing is I call it shift happens because I'm like, everything goes wrong on shift days. And this is a shift day. I was taking my kids to school and putting them in the car. And I noticed that right by my car, it smelled a lot like my husband's gear. And like, I don't know, like you, I'm sure can understand this, but like the gear smell is a really specific smell. It doesn't just smell like a campfire, like grass, you're like, oh, wow, that stinks. And I was just like, wow, that's really strong. And I thought, I wonder if he had brought it home to switch it out or something.
Hmm.
And we have a door that looks out of our garage to our back. We live on like 3 acres. So we have a big barn and a pasture. And as I looked outside, our barn was on fire.
Oh,
And we have ducks and we just had this heat lamp that caught our barn on fire. And so, yeah, I mean, I ran out there and like I said, we don't live in Aurora. So we live in like a neighboring city. And I knew right away where I could tell where it had started based on the smoke. And I poked my head in the door and I knew by the smoke, I was like, oh, I need to keep this closed because if I open up the garage door, the man door, like I'm going to lose this whole thing. And in the moment, you're just like going about these things. And I called Ty and I was like, hey, barn's on fire. I got to call 911.
yeah.
And it's such he's like, what? Okay. And I did. I just called it in. And even calling it in, it was just like, hey, yeah, you have a barn fire. Like there's no people or animals in it. This is where it started, but it's full smoke. Like you have a full fire response. Very casually just, it probably didn't sound as casual then, but even just a lot more so than I think the average person being like, well, yep, this is what's going on.
Did you save the
Yeah. And luckily I saved the ducks.
my
Yes. Our ducks were like in a little pin on the backside. I don't know how our ducks survived, to be really honest. It was wild, but they did. I just ran in and grabbed them and put them in a little like metal barn trough thing. The ducks are fine. They're doing great. They have a great new home.
You could
And we will rebuild. But it was, after it was all said and done and going through, dealing with insurance and like inventorying all of your items and just and when they do show up and you're so conditioned to be like, please do this, please do that, you know what's supposed to happen. It feels almost, I don't know, like more slow motion because you're just like, in my head, I was just waiting for like all of these steps to happen that I've listened to so many times or I've, talked through so many times. And so that part is really hard because it also wasn't like our crew, our guys. But it does make you have a lot more empathy for the folks that he's running on this with. It's just like, oh, this is what they experience when you show up to their house and having a little bit more just like, okay, that's hard for them to watch that, or this is going to be a long road, but this will turn out okay. Or, don't just throw everything on the ground to try to see what's behind here. Like, be cautious of their belongings. And so I think trying to make light out of what was kind of a bummer of a situation. It wasn't our house, it was our barn. Our animals were fine. We were fine. So
right.
we got very lucky in all of that. It could have been much worse. And yeah, just I think taking away the positive lesson of just like, okay, well, we're always on the other side of this, right? And so how do you show up a little bit differently or be a little bit more empathetic in that moment to those people that are standing on the curb watching all of their belongings burn?
Right. I mean, I've never been near a fire, so I don't know what it feels like, but imagine that it would be just the most terrifying thing in the world. So good for you for keeping your cool. That's pretty awesome. You'd be a great firefighter.
I don't know.
So any funny stories, any things that you want to share, anything that comes to your mind, knowing?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had the barn fire, the shift happens. Like I said, Ty is at a high volume, high acuity house. He runs a lot of stuff. I often joke that I'm like, we're in Colorado. We're like a landlocked state. We're nowhere near the ocean. And I say oftentimes, I'm like, he could come home at this point and be like, there was a great white shark in the road today. And be like, oh, okay. Like, there's just enough wild things that you're like, yeah, not surprising. One of my, I will say, favorite stories is they do run on a homeless lady who lives in a culvert that is kind of on the on-ramp of like one of the main highways through Aurora. So they run on her often. She is homeless, and she likes to start fires in that culvert. Usually probably to stay warm or, whatever she's doing. Sometimes it's a medical call to take care of her, but they've gotten to know her.
Mhm.
And over getting to know her, they I think a lot of people don't always realize that they do get to know several people in the community. There are, these people that call a lot, and they talked to her and found out that she loved painting and had talked to her about painting and stuff on this one call. And, a couple shifts later, they were coming back from another call, and sure enough, like fire in the culvert.
Mhm.
So the crew stopped and they've got to talk to this lady and be like, please don't light fires in the culvert. Like, cars are getting on the freeway. We can't do that. And she had lit a fire because she painted them a picture and she didn't know how to get a hold of them. She's homeless. She doesn't have a phone. So she was like, if I lit this fire, I knew you guys would come. I saw you drive by.
Mhm.
And sure enough, so
Good.
they had to have the conversation of like, okay, well, we can't do that. But she gave them this photo or this painting that she had done, and it hangs in the firehouse. And it's kind of just like a cool, like, she is somebody in the community that they are serving. And it's a good reminder that, these are people, right? And it's there, and everybody kind of has a chuckle about it of like, oh, there's the culvert painting, but yeah, you never know. There's a bazillion things, if we don't typically watch the like fire shows on TV. We have every now and then, and it's almost maddening because you're like, they could have way better stories than
Yeah.
this. Like, this is nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they're just not realistic most of the time. The things they say and do
No,
would never happen in
no.
any fire department. One question that I often like to ask is any advice you would give. And it sounds like you have I love the group message. So that's maybe
Yeah.
advice to give to start a group message with other fire spouses. Anything else that comes to your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I would just say get involved. Just go. Like, just go to the station if that's okay with the department that your partner works for, obviously. But if there's a walk-off ceremony or if there's a promotional ceremony or if anything, like, just show up and go, because there are other people that are looking for connection, like
Mhm.
there are. And so the more you go, you'll start to recognize faces and introduce yourself to the firefighters and the spouses. I will say that some of my very, very, very closest friends are other female firefighters that work alongside my husband. And so it's not just spouses that I've made friendships with, it is the other people on the line. But yeah, go. And then really, like, we started showing up to the station, and then Ty was working holidays, that naturally happens. And he just asked, one time he was like, hey, does anybody want to see if their family wants to come down for dinner? And a couple of us were like, yeah, we'll come. Like, why not? And it started as like two of us showing up, two or three of us, years ago. And it's grown into like, that is a hard tradition now. Like, a lot of spouses, I think, say they hate when their firefighter lands a holiday. And my hot take would be like, I absolutely love when Ty works holidays. Firehouse holidays are my favorite holidays. So, like Thanksgiving, for example, if Ty doesn't work Thanksgiving, because it's 3 shifts, so he's either going to work the shift before or the shift after, we do Thanksgiving, like, full stop. And so the spouses, but that's how I got the spouse text message thing started, was like, I had met like 2 or 3 wives, and I just asked Ty, I was like, can you ask so and so if they can just send me their wife's number? And then I just started like slowly being like, hey, as I be like, do you want to be on our group chat? Like, sure, and I would just add them. And I tell people too, I'd be like, if you don't want to, like, please don't feel like you have to be included. But that's kind of how the group chat got started, is like, we would show up and we're like, what did they get to cook? What are, like, if we could talk about this, it'd be a lot easier. So, but now, yeah, we do Thanksgiving and Christmas together every year. And the spouses show up. We show up early and we cook. So we all pitch in cooking together. The guys will like get stuff started, but they're busy running. So it's like now nothing has to turn off. So we all cook together in the kitchen, and some of us cook, some of us, like, this last year for Christmas, one of the other wives set up a gingerbread making thing in the bay, which for all the little kids, which was super fun. And our kids range from, like I said, I have a 19-year-old, but all the way down to like babies. And we have a bunch of 3 to 9-year-olds. a bunch. But yeah, they made gingerbread houses. So one wife was doing that, and sometimes we're just hanging out. But we cook. We can cover the food when the crew runs out, and then we uncover it. But the kids show up in their pajamas. They run around, and by the end of the night, they're tired. So we get to take them home, put them to bed. It was easy for us. There's no cleanup. It's paper plates, so it just goes in the trash. But yeah, that's really how that's grown. I would just say show up, or if there's a holiday, just be like, hey, is it okay if my family comes by? Even if it's just for dessert. Like if they don't want to cook a whole meal or whatever, it's like bring a dessert,
Yeah.
bring cookies or bring brownies or whatever. And you'll get to know people, and it's so fun. And now I have a really close group of friends, and my kids have friends that are the other firefighters' kids, and that's awesome. It's easy for us. Last year, he worked Easter, and so we showed up at the firehouse, all the wives, and instead of having to like do our own Easter egg hunts, we clipped eggs to the crew on all of their uniforms, and then let them loose and let all the kids like pull the eggs off of them. It was hilarious. It was a blast, and again, it like was easier for us because we were all there. Like some of us brought eggs, some of us brought like squirt guns, whatever, bubbles. We kind of just divided and conquered in the group chat, and then showed up, and the kids left happy and exhausted, and we had done it. And like the spouse doesn't miss out on the holiday.
Right.
They're not like, oh man, my family's doing this. It's like, no, you spent the day with your family.
Right.
And
happen to also be working.
Right. And so it's like, that's awesome, and at least here, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Natick, but holidays can be rough. They can be really busy call volume days, and so I think even for the crew, it's like you don't know what they're coming back from, but when they come back and they pull in the bay, it's like, we're all there having a time. The kids are running around, and so it's just a nice like little switch, I think, to be like their kids run up to them, they're excited to see them, they're chasing them around, they're playing basketball, gives them that like however long it is, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes, like that reprieve of just like a reset.
Right. It reminds them of real life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then they're a little more like ready to go for whatever is coming next. And, I wasn't sitting at home alone and trying to do this all by myself. And they weren't there feeling like they'd missed out. And so I don't go do holidays with family on my own. We do holidays together. Like, so if Ty's on duty, we go to the firehouse, and then we do Christmas on another day. And that works just fine.
Yeah. Right. Especially when they're young. It's not a big deal.
No. And they grow up around it. Like your kids are so little, mine grew up in it too. And I think they have a great sense of like empathy and understanding now. And like that is how they get the pride, right? Of just being like, oh no, like somebody really needed help. This is a fun day, and they're not having a fun day, but we can help them. And that's how they're helping them, is being understanding that dad or mom is the one that has to go and help out for a few minutes, and they'll be back. But, I think that's how you build that pride instead of like resentment.
Now, you mentioned that some of the female firefighters are some of your best friends. What advice
Yes.
would you give? It can be hard being married to a firefighter, right? They're gone
Mm-hmm.
for at least, I imagine, most firefighters 2 days out of the week. What advice?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days.
Right? What advice would you give to a new fire wife who has trouble with the idea that there are females on the fire department, right? Like somebody
Get to know them. Yeah, I would say get to know them. They can be your absolute like best resource and advocate. They're doing that job, so they're seeing what your spouse is seeing, and they're living that same experience. But also, like a lot of times, they are a mom, or they are a wife, or they do have a female perspective. So, it's just different. You're able to say like, oh, what's going on with this, or why was this? I think asking a question, they're able to translate it maybe a little bit differently, because we like, from my experience, like, girls will ask a lot of questions. Like we want to know all the details, right? And I think you don't always get that. So you're like, what was this? How was the night? And wasn't great. And sometimes that's an okay, that's the answer, and it's okay. But you're able to be like, oh, what's the deal with this? And I just think, yeah, the more you get to know them, you have much better understanding and comfort for, having them there, and just the trust that you can have in them. And I think that's all that needs to happen is once you go and talk to these ladies and get to know them, a lot of times you're just like, oh wow, they're awesome, like they're great, and it could be like that in any job. I work with executives, and so it's intimidating. They no matter what world you're in, yes, they live together, they eat, share meals, and all of that, but they're awesome. I would say just put yourself out there and get to know them because they're probably feeling a lot of the same way, right? Like they see the spouse come in and they're like, oh no, I'm sure it's nerve wracking for them. So the more that you just are open and be like, hey, I'm so and so, like nice to meet you. I think it just like brings the room down a little bit and makes everybody feel a little more comfortable.
I think you're probably right. And even just kind of hearing how Robbie talks about some of the female firefighters that he works with, like they are one of the guys, right? They're
Oh,
not.
yeah. I mean, they'll always say, they'll be like, this is like living with my brothers. I mean, and that's exactly how I imagine it. I'm like, I have a little girl and she has three older brothers. And I see how she interacts with her little brothers. And when I go and hang out with my girlfriends who are on the job, I'm like, gosh, you're just like my daughter. Like, just, that's exactly how they interact. It's like living with their brothers. They're like, they tell them, they're like, you're smelly or you're stinky or I'm like, that's exactly the life they're living.
Right. And I love that, right? And I just
Yes.
think there should be any field where it's a big deal that there are female or male, whatever it is. But that's the world we live in. And so I just, it's nice to see people making strides in the right direction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge, huge advocate of the ladies on the line. And it's important to me too. I have a daughter who wants to do this. And yes, her dad does it and she's super excited to follow in her dad's footsteps. But, when she sees her Auntie Lindsay geared up and doing that, my goodness, like that is just the coolest thing in the world for her. That is she gets to see herself doing that. And so I'm so appreciative of them doing what they do because it does give her that exact like you can do this role model. And I think that's so awesome. And she calls them all our kids, all the fire crew, they're either uncles or aunties. So
Mhm. I like that.
it's really fun for the schools if you do that. Like my
Oh,
poor
yeah.
daughter's teachers, they're like, how many uncles does your daughter have? Like she has like 40 uncles. I'm like, oh yeah.
That's one of the fire uncles. That's really
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, she has this enormous, but to her, like they are just like my husband's brother and my sister. They are no different. And that's exactly how I view them too. They are no different. They are her uncles and aunties. And I love that. Even we're so lucky where we are that, even to the chief of department knows her by first name and he is Uncle Chief, and I think that's just like the coolest thing. He's all about like the family side of it too. And it's really cool that the kids get to experience that.
that's wonderful. Yeah. Now, am I making a big assumption that everybody in your family must ski a lot?
Yeah, that is an assumption. My husband Ty was a competitive skier in high school, and he did that a lot. But I think after doing it so much in high school and competing, it does take a toll on you. And we grew up very very close to a ski resort, and so it was our life growing up. But then after that, you're kind of just like, well, over it. So we don't actually ski. Yeah, I don't ski at all. The kids we've taken once or twice, but yeah, we don't get up there too often. It's also really, really expensive.
It's so much money. It's crazy. Yeah. My husband loves
Yeah.
to ski. I'm not a skier or a snowboarder or anything, but I think Colorado is one of the places that he either went or wanted to go skiing or something. So I know it's
Okay.
a big thing there.
It is. It is. And it's pretty, but I don't love the really cold. So I'm always like, oh, I'm good without it. But yeah, we don't ski. We spend a lot of time outside, but
Yeah.
we
What's
just
the
don't
summer
ski.
like there?
This summer it's gonna be real hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually Colorado summers are beautiful, but it's just gotten really hot early. So it's been like the 80s in March, which means in the summer it'll be hot and dry. And it is really dry here, really, really dry.
Mhm.
So yeah, it'll be July and August are going to be real hot and real dry, but springs are beautiful. It's like 60, 70, 80 degrees and blue sky. And it is pretty. It's a pretty place to live.
Great. So, any last thoughts? Anything that you wanted to mention?
No, like I said, I think it's cool what you're doing. It's interesting to listen to the different episodes and hear, like you said, trends of similarities of wives. I think there is a lot of similarity amongst most of us,
Yeah.
the takeaways and stuff. But yeah, I would just say, if anything, yeah, get involved. And when you do, and you find your community, it just makes it so, so much easier. And not even easier, but just like rewarding and something that's awesome. It's not just about being easier, but it is about like, this is your life. Your spouse may be a firefighter, but your life is the fire service. It really is. It impacts a lot of aspects of your life. And so, make it good, get involved and enjoy it.
Right. You're not just the supporting character, right? Like it's also,
No, you're absolutely a part of fire service. Yeah. Like you're in it. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Anything you'd want me to talk about with future guests? Anything that you wish I would ask people?
Gosh.
What
I
do you
think, like I said, I joke all the time, the shift happens. Just hearing other, like, what's gone wrong for you and your spouse is on duty sometimes
Good one.
it's funny. Then it's nice to be able to like look back and laugh. Both times my daughters need stitches, my spouse was on duty. Like when my son broke his arm, my husband was on duty. Like it's inevitable, right? But I think it just gives you a little like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Like that happens to everyone aspect. But it's also sometimes funny. I bet you could get some wild stories of things that
Like
go
that.
wrong
Can I borrow that
inevitably.
shift happens?
Yeah, you totally can. Yeah, I always joke that's, I'm like, oh, shift happens. Like it just goes sideways and the universe knows. Yeah, so that's kind of fun. I think your questions though, they do span the experience and that's awesome. And where people are from, that's really interesting. It seems like a lot of the guests you maybe know from Natick.
So I started it off. It has mostly been the Natick Firewives,
Yeah, that's cool.
which is cool. It's been fun for me, but I also recognize that people who are listening don't know these people, so it's maybe not quite as fun for them to listen to it. But for me, it's been great to get to know people one on one because I go to
Yeah.
events, right, and I get to know them. But a lot of times, it's hard to get that. Like I never would have thought to ask one of them, "Hey, what did you go to college for?" Right? So
Yeah.
we're busy and talking and a million things. So that part has been really fun for me. But I've been trying to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It was interesting because like I had never heard of Natick, and I'm in Colorado. I know Boston. We have some buddies on the Boston Fire Department. So I was like, oh, how close is that to Boston? So I was doing my research. I was like, how big is it? Like how many stations do you have? Just to kind of get an idea. Because that's another thing, right? Like your experience, it depends on,
For sure.
what city area and how many stations. So it's like, oh, okay, how similar is it? Oh, well, it's like, Natick in my world would be like, oh, okay, that's kind of like Boulder. I can
Right.
relate that to be like, oh, okay, got it. So I think that's cool.
For sure. It's been super different depending on who I talk to. I think it sounds like Aurora is a little bit busier, a little bit wilder than what Natick sounds like, but just from the stories that you're telling.
Yeah. So Aurora has like, they're getting ready to open their 18th station.
Oh, wow.
So just for like context, like my husband's station is an engine and a ladder and then the hazmat. And so the engine he runs on ran 5,600 calls last year, just the engine he runs on.
I think that's the entire
Um,
town of Natick last year or something along those lines.
but yeah, so it's just like, but he's also in a really busy spot. As you get to the outskirts, it slows down just like any other
Like,
department there. But yeah, it's busy. We share borders with Denver, and so there's a lot of mutual aid between those two departments where it's like, oh, this might be Denver, this might be Aurora, but yeah, we're growing fast, and it is Aurora can continue to grow, so that'll be interesting as that happens.
and I mean, the fire service gets busier and busier every year, right? They get so many
It really
calls.
does. Yeah, but it is interesting. I mean, whether you're in a, like you said, Natick's a little smaller, or we have friends in Boston, we've been to New York. Like, it is so interesting that you can visit a firehouse across the whole United States, and it's kind of the same thing no matter where you go. When you go in, it's like, oh yeah, this is just like home. You find the similarities pretty quick. But I think that's so cool.
Yeah, for sure. I also would say the opposite though. I mean, how they can all have completely different schedules. It's the same, in theory, the same job, right? But they're
Yes.
completely different. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I'd say just like the vibe, I guess, the
Oh, for sure.
personalities. Yeah, when you walk in and you're just like, "Oh, okay, this
Like
is
the fire
this."
world.
Yeah, it's very much so. It's like, and it's like they know. You walk in and they're like, "Oh, where do you work?" And you're like, "Oh,
Right, right.
okay." They know right away. There's no hiding it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Wow. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time. This was so nice. Thank you for reaching out and
Yeah.
for everything. So good luck with your conference. I hope it goes
Thank
really
you.
well.
Yeah, like I said, reach out if you ever need anything. You're doing awesome. Keep
Thank
doing
you.
it.
Thanks. Good luck to the conference. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed being here as much as I did. If you have any questions for me or if you'd like to be interviewed, please reach out at thefirewivespodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Tune in next week for the next episode of Firewives.